Volcanoids is an interesting game. It's so interesting that pretty much nobody talks about it or plays it, which is odd, because it seems it was relatively well received among users on the Steam user reviews page, but according to Steam charts, it didn't do so hot. Volcanoids is a first-person shooter that involves a little bit of base building, base defense, exploration, and progression through a very linear tech tree to unlock better weapons, crafting stations, defenses, etc. Volcanoids looks okay. It looks decent, but it's nothing special. The overall texture resolution seems to be kind of low, giving it a bland look. Almost looks kind of like Skyrim when you compared it to like the mods that bump the texture resolution. The art style fits for the most part to a steampunk game, but then again, it's kind of a gritty, dark art style, which doesn't really fit. You know, they would have been much better off with something a little bit over the top.
Let me in! Let me in!
Door stuck! Door stuck!
There's colors, but again, they're kind of muted overall. All of this seems to be made much worse than it actually is by the overall lack of lighting in general. There's barely even a shadow map in this thing. However, these graphical issues are not really game-breaking. It's very likely that the developer consists of a small team. It might even be one guy. They might not even gotten to doing graphics yet. This might be their just placeholder stuff. Seeing as they've been regularly updating the game routinely over the past year or so, this kind of makes sense. Sound in Volcanoids is a bit of a mixed bag. Overall quality of effects and their mixing is relatively well handled. Nothing sounds out of place, or nothing sounds lower quality than the other. But the sound effects all sound very stocksoundeffects.net. The original sound effect of the revolver was actually one of those. It was one that I had heard plenty of times before. It was almost like the Wilhelm scream of a gun. Now it has a bit of a air quotes remade sound effect, but it still doesn't really sound much different than what you would expect from a stock sound. The game is also very quiet, seeing as there's barely any ambient sound or music. It kind of leaves it empty. When you're near a drill ship, there's plenty of sound effects and whatnot from the modules, and if the ship is moving, you hear the drill and the engine. But otherwise, it's almost silent, and there's only, to my knowledge, one soundtrack that's in the game, and that is the main menu music. It's pretty alright. Now, Volcanoids at its core is a first-person shooter. The overall shooting mechanics are as of what you would expect. The weapons actually handle just fine, and the controls are tight and fluid where they need to be. The next part is the base building aspect. You, air quotes, commandeer a drill ship from the locals and make it your own.
Dang it up!
Outfitting it with modules along the side or the roof of the ship, production, research, refineries, power, there's a few others. Each one of these has a tier from 1 to 3 that you unlock through the research. Occasionally, enemies or drill ships will drop parts, using these to reverse engineer the broken part, or the functional one, to create a new one to use in production of your ship module. You can actually disable individual modules to save power, since they don't draw power when they are closed. Now, previously mentioned ships that I was talking about that you reverse engineer the parts from will from time to time send out patrols of enemies to attack you. They're cogs. I'm sure it stands for something. Basically, they're robot humanoid-like enemies that use guns that are the same as yours. They're no different. Unfortunately, the cogs have almost the basic of unit AI. It's basically just a chase/shoot the player. And even when there's huge packs of them, they all follow the exact same pathfinding AI. Better cog AI, for example, let's say the groups of cogs would break up into smaller subgroups that would try to get behind or on the sides of you, and like a half circle would have been a great way to flush them out.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Also, maybe more types of enemies would have been great, seeing as they are pretty much all the same. The only thing that's different is their color palette. They're either green, blue, or red. Production, science, and refinery. And it's based off of what ship they come from, and the only thing that changes is what part they drop when they die. Volcanoids' answer to challenge to the player is to flood them with enemies. It's just a bunch of the same enemy in a huge pack. The lack of this just creates not a very fair challenge. Different dynamics would have not only created a more challenging approach, but have also been more fair, since pretty much all you're doing is struggling to step out 20 roaches trying to kill you. Boom! Later on, you gain access to better weapons and different ammunition types for those weapons, as well as for some of the older ones you previously had. The starting revolver gets AP or high-powered ammo. I don't remember exactly. That one went away pretty quick because when you switch to the new ammo, it changes the repeat rate of the gun. This sucks. You're so used to aiming and shooting at a specific interval with this gun, and suddenly it changes. Why would you do this? They also added armor to the last update, the combat update. Basically, it just gives you a second health bar. This is a necessity, seeing as the cogs will flood you like roaches, and there's no chance you'll get away completely unscathed, and without body armor, you die pretty quick. Now, the other option. You can attack their drill ships. Inside, there will be spawners that build cogs. You break these, and it stops the reinforcement altogether. After that, you can break the entire ship and get the previously mentioned parts from the ship. Breaking the ships kind of sucks though, seeing as most of these modules are pretty durable, and even with the explosives, it'll take several hits. Some of them you just pickaxe them from the back and it'll take 12 or so hits. And then after you break every single module on the ship, you still have to mine out the rubble. It's just kind of a time waster. Now, the drill ship concept and the volcano erupting is actually a really cool concept, but in the actual gameplay aspect, it doesn't really do much. It looks cool and it covers the world with ash after it goes off, but all it does gameplay-wise is reset the spawn nodes for resources. It does tie into the story, however. Basically, the cogs are creating these eruptions. They basically drove everyone off the island by doing this, or killed everybody. Later on, underground, you find big-ass laser drills to support this theory. Now, one thing that's interesting is Volcanoids has gotten a ton of updates over the past few years. Recently, the combat update is the one that added a bunch of different weapons and the armor to the game. Interestingly enough, Volcanoids has multiplayer support, but I couldn't convince any of my friends to buy the game yet since they're all reserved for once the updates are done. One thing that's nice about single player though is you can quick save. It's a great thing to have. Why do developers keep removing this feature? Oh, and you can customize the difficulty as well with sliders. It's kind of neat. You can just tune it to however you want it. With the tons of updates this game has gotten, I can't imagine maybe at this rate in a year or two, this game will be a big hit. But for right now, it's going to remain, as it is now, mostly unknown. There's a lot of filler, like the tunnel driving. It's basically a time waster, seeing as it has relatively little impact on gameplay, and in a lot of the cases, it's pretty slow-paced. I had my fun with this game, but even with its filler, I maybe got 2 afternoons worth of playtime before I was end credits. I really do hope the developer keeps updating the game over time like they have been, seeing as it's been getting updates very regularly and it has improved the game. But at this point in time, I do not recommend the game. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you'd liked the video, you know what to do. If you didn't, you know, do your thing. I'm still going through the bit of the learning process with each video to try to understand better how to write and structure the video like I previously mentioned. So, again, if you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment. I'll read it.